Welcome everybody um, to our Why Try webinar today. Really excited. This is going to be, I think, a really fun and insightful discussion, and couldn't be more excited to have the panelists that we have. Before I introduce our panelists, let me just introduce a little bit on the background of the webinar. For those that are new, we've been doing these as an organization. So I represent the Why Try organization. We specialize in teaching and helping professionals teach the skills of resilience. And we've been around for about 20 years. And we started doing these webinars about 4 years ago, and they just kind of took on a life of their own. And so I'm the fortunate one that gets to moderate and lead out on most of these, and I just absolutely love it. They're always really interesting conversations, and just feel really fortunate to be able to do this. We will have a couple notes on the webinar. We're scheduled to go for about an hour. We will have a live chat, as you can tell. So the chat will be live and active. Feel free to use it. One note on the chat to make it a little more useful. If you want to take a look at a specific setting on your chat tool, that I'm going to make a small request of everybody. Right where you type a message into the chat, right above that, it says to, and then there's a little drop down menu, and that's where you select who you're sending your message to. If that does not say to everyone, I'm going to ask you to adjust it over so that you're sharing your comments with everyone. If it only says to hosts and panelists or just a specific name, then not everybody can see your comments. So if you're willing, adjust that over so that you're sharing comments with everyone. And then make that adjustment. And then just to double check it, after you have made that adjustment, let's have everybody. So right now, June is kind of the fun time of year in education where everybody's catching their breath a little bit. I think most people have made it across the finish line. As a few of you may still have a graduation right in front of you. Type into the chat an emoji that describes or expresses how you're feeling right now at this moment on June on June 6th within the I love it.
Some good ones.
They make me laugh every time. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Nice job. Thank you, everybody. And thanks for making that adjustment to your chat tool. All right. Well, my name's Jason Johnson, and I'm excited to get the discussion going today. Today's topic for our webinar is going to be lessons from rural educators on building resilience. And it's been really fun leading up to this, some of the discussions we've had leading up to this. I think there's some really great insights that all educators can take away from some of the experience that's being brought to the table today. So let me introduce our panelists, and then we'll get into the conversation. First of all, we have Dr. Melissa Seydorf out of Stanfield, Arizona. Dr. Seydorf is the superintendent of the Stanfield Elementary School District in Arizona, where she also manages business operations, grants, human resources. Got a rich background in teaching and educational leadership, serves as the executive director of multiple rural education associations, hosts a podcast called the Rural Scoop, which is a great resource for really interesting discussions, hopefully similar to what we have today. Also the author of The Resilient Rural Leader and teaches at Northern Arizona University, just to name a few things. Welcome, Melissa. Super happy to have you here today.
It's fantastic to be here, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I am a passionate, avid supporter of anything that builds resilience, especially in our rural communities. It's such an important thing to be able to rely on our resiliency to make sure we're making things happen for kids.
Amen to that. Thank you. Next, we have Mike Hogg, Vice President at Partners for Rural Impact. Let's see, VP for Place-Based Partnerships at Partners for Rural Impact, has over 20 years of public school leadership experience at Appalachian districts. His work focuses on ensuring success for all rural students. Former middle school teacher, also an avid outdoor enthusiast that enjoys it all. Mike, we're super happy to have you here as an individual and also representing an organization that we have a nice history of working with that we really respect as well. So thank you so much for being here, Mike.
It's a joy to be here, and I appreciate the invitation to be in conversation to talk about rural young people and what it takes for them to thrive and succeed. So I look forward to the conversation. And by the way, Jason, I know I've got some Kentucky people on here that heard you say Appalachia.
I'm so sorry.
When is Mike gonna correct him?
Right now?
Right now, Jason, is when that's gonna happen.
Yeah, go ahead and correct me. Give me the proper
Okay,
pronunciation.
it's Appalachia, and the easy way to remember it is we throw an apple at you. So there you go.
What a great teaching! What a great teaching
there you
technique.
go. There you go.
Would anybody on here believe me if I said that I did it on purpose just because I wanted us all to witness Mike teaching with that clever verbal? But Carrie says no. Carrie, you're right.
I was going to say there's some Kentucky people on here just going, and West Virginia and some Tennessee who are going, when's he going to lay it out there? So yeah.
This is certainly a case of my the city boy in me showing that got it. So thank you. I appreciate you setting me straight on that. Let's
my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Trina knows me. Trina's not buying it either. Well, let's start off. I was wondering if maybe we could kick off the discussion just by hearing a little bit more about what your current roles are, a little bit more about the organizations you represent, what you've been working on the last little while. Let's start off. Let's go Melissa first and then Mike on that one.
Sure, that sounds great. So currently I am in a position with a school district in Arizona. I'm the superintendent of the Stanfield Elementary School District. Until the end of this month, I am transitioning out and retiring after 32 years in public education. But I am excited that I get an opportunity to hand off to Jennifer Murrieta, who's actually on this call, which is fantastic. We've been able to do some succession planning. So we've worked together for the past few years. She's the current principal, and we've worked for the last, 8 months to ensure that she's ready for the role. So I'm stepping away from that and excited to see what she's able to do under her leadership. I'm currently the president of the National Rural Education Association, which is, if you're not familiar with it, it's a wonderful opportunity to get involved with national rural advocacy efforts. And they do some pretty great professional learning opportunities as well. And I'm serving as the executive director for the Arizona Rural Schools Association, and some things that we're really excited about rolling out. We have a pilot that's coming up in the next year with the GRAD partnership, working with early warning systems for students that potentially are going to be not on track to graduate on time. And so that's something that we're excited to get rolling out. And then we also have a rural community of practice, and am lucky enough to have 135 leaders over 16 states nationwide that are participating in that. And this upcoming year, we're rolling out with the NAU Rural Resource Center a new community of practice for single site districts. So just one school in the district that are run by a superintendent principal, because there's some unique challenges when you're the only head honcho in a building. And so we're going to be creating some supports for them. As Jason said, I'm really excited about the book that I just published in April, The Resilient Rural Leader, and looking to ensure that that's hopefully something that I can take out into the field and support leaders across the country with. And Then I'm also doing some work with, and I got to put in this shameless plug for the Rural Library Network. I'm on their advisory board and really excited about the things that they're doing out of the Rural Library Network. So that's just some of the things that I'm working on that I'm excited about right now.
I love it. Thank you so much. I'm going to throw a couple of links in the chat based on what you just shared. And Mike, tell us a little bit more about what you're part of and been working on.
You should probably have let me go first because Melissa's like, I mean, yeah, like, wow. Every time I hear that, Melissa, it's the second time I'm going, wow, I get to be in a conversation with you. It's lovely.
Oh, that's so nice of you.
I serve as the vice president for place-based partnerships at Partners for Rural Impact. We say PRI because that's a mouthful. Get rural in there a couple times. And the work that I lead might be more easily accessed in thinking about collective impact work in communities. And so in thinking about how PRI works, using that collective impact frame, it's really activating the village. We talk about the village. All of a sudden goes, oh, it takes a village, and it's almost a platitude at this point. But really naming the members of the village and activating them around young people and what it takes for them to thrive and to succeed is a lovely, lovely question for a community to engage around. And it's amazing what comes out, especially if you have kids at the table. I know Trina Bussell is on here as well, but when you bring them into the conversation, it's powerful. Kids are just, they're the loveliest. They're the best. And so as we think about working in community with the schools at the center, kids are in school a lot, but also activating local government, the faith-based community. In rural communities, there is a place where folks gather to talk, wherever that is in the rural community, ensuring that those people with informal authority, which is the most powerful authority that there is in a community, that those folks are at the table too, shaping that success path for young people. And so, my history my professional career has mostly been in public education, mostly been in rural spaces. And I enjoy visiting the city. I will go to Cincinnati this weekend and watch the Reds play. And I'm really happy to leave Cincinnati and go back down I-75 and turn back into my holler, if you will, to come home. But some of the work that's been that we've been focusing on lately, I would say expanding the community school model, where we're really addressing the whole child, expanding that work, because we know that it's more than just reading and math that kids need to thrive and succeed. There has to be this foundation where they're safe, healthy, and supported. And to that end, I don't want to get too far down the road on chronic absenteeism, because I know that's a conversation for us to have a little bit later today. But it's something we've been thinking a lot about. What are those various aspects? Because if kids aren't at school, they're not safe, they're not healthy, they're not supported. Ergo, we can kiss the other things goodbye. So really doing some deep thinking around that as well, Jason.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great setup for where I want to go next. For the next part, I want to just spend just a moment just to kind of set us up before we get into some solutions and some practical ideas. Maybe just talk a little bit about some of the challenges that are specific to rural communities for both students and faculty. Let's go Mike first, and then Melissa on this one.
Yeah, well, sort of mentioned chronic absenteeism, but I don't think that's completely a rural. I think that's just across our country. A challenge I think you asked us to start out with, or one of those things is recruitment of teachers. Right now, there's really a struggle in rural spaces to recruit teachers, and it lives on a lot of levels. Actually, if you do choose to live in that rural community, is housing even available to you, or are you having to drive 30, 45 minutes or an hour back to have housing to serve in that school? And I think that creates multiple problems. One, of course, you're spending a lot of money on gas going back and forth every day. You're also losing time in your life for balance, because we know, especially early career teachers, they're out of balance to begin with because they're trying to figure out how do I do this thing? How do I get some form of balance? Those are challenges. And then the other part I think that is inherent in that is a lot of times those folks will be like, I'll get my 3 or 4 years of experience, then I'm going to move into a suburban or an urban setting where I'm not losing that time. I'm not spending those dollars on fuel. And so there's an incredible turnover that's occurring in a rural space. And I can just literally keep going down the list. And I know Melissa has things that, that she would add to that as well. But when I think about the culture, when I think about staffing and quality of education, and you're continually turning that over, it's a challenge. It's a challenge across our country.
Yeah. And to piggyback off what you said, Mike, about the teacher recruitment and retention issues and keeping them under contract, which obviously that retention piece is so important because it's so disruptive to an education system when you've got people coming and going. But I think there's a principal pipeline issue. Leadership is harder and harder to find because you typically get your principals out of your teacher ranks. And so that's something that potentially we're seeing less and less of those teachers that are willing to step into leadership roles. They would rather stay in the classroom. And to Glennis's point, it's not just teachers, it's everyone that's part of the school ecosystem, whether it's support staff or drivers. For a lot of us, drivers are an issue, keeping them under contract. As well as some of our other support roles like paraprofessionals. So that's been a real concern and a challenge, especially in our rural communities. One of the things that Mike and I have talked about before is the way that you view rural areas in general. Are you looking at it through a deficit lens, or are you looking at it through there are assets in this community that we can draw on? And so I think one of the things that is a challenge for rural people is that people think that, well, it's a rural community. There's really nothing there. And we call it in the middle of nowhere. And it really is in the middle of somewhere because somebody lives there. And there are things that can be applied to the problems at hand in terms of assets. And I know that we'll talk more about that as we get into some of the other things. I think another issue to really bring to the forefront is well-being, whether it's mental well-being or it's access to medical care. Often in rural communities, you don't have the resources available for any kind of support around those medical needs. And so, yes, you are, as Mike said, driving distances if you can to get support around those kinds of things. Economically, I think that there are some challenges right now, higher poverty rates, which I know has a lot to bear on a system as a community, not just in the school. And potentially because we know that the school is often the heart of the community and usually the largest employer in a rural community, there's a workforce development concern attached to that. And so if those economic challenges mean that there are fewer jobs, potentially you have people leaving to find them. As Mike noted, there's a churn potentially that happens, especially in your rural schools. So I guess there's a lot more I could say too, Mike. I could list and go on and on and on, but I guess I'll stop there.
Yeah, Melissa, you said something that just reactivated when we had a conversation a couple of days ago, and it's that double-edged sword of being in a rural community as a teacher, and living in that rural community is this lack of privacy. You don't get to put it down. And you and I talked about as superintendents, you don't get to put it down ever. But, the teacher that, if you go out on a Friday night and in some communities, if you have a beverage that adults can have, there's going to be someone there who goes, oh, Mr. Hogg had a beer at X, Y, and Z. And so I think that, yes, I love that, Trina. You're a celebrity when you go to Walmart. Absolutely, absolutely. And you put your hoodie up and go on a Saturday morning when you just need to get some half and half for your coffee and trying to get in and out of there. So it's lovely in the way that you're held by the community as a leader. The other side of that, of course, is that privacy piece. You know, if you buy a new car, you know, why didn't you buy a used car? And is it the base model or did you buy a high end?
Right.
All those
Are we
things.
paying you too much?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So as a public educator, always buy a used car, don't buy a new car. So yeah.
Great points. I love it. Mike, that sets us up really nicely for where I want to go next. And by the way, great. I love the chat's active. Keep it up. I think your comments are really resonating, panelists. So I have to, like, full disclosure, I'm a city boy, born and raised as a city boy. And so my role here at Y Tribe for the last 8 years, I realized I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Jason Johnson. So my background is I'm a school psychologist, come from the world of public ed, worked in the largest school district in the state of Utah as a school psych. And when I took on this role at Y Tribe, my role is I'm the director of training and research. And it gives me the opportunity to go throughout the country and train and collaborate with educators and mental health professionals in all areas of the country. I get to work in very urban settings and very rural settings as well. And I feel so fortunate to do it. One of the things that has impressed me a lot in some of the rural work that I've been able to do is just what you've said. There's this this unique thing that happens. I think Jose even acknowledged it. He mentioned we drive the buses too in the chat. There's this really unique thing that happens where in rural settings, a lot of educators are wearing tons of hats, and that's not completely unique. That happens in all areas of education, but in the world of rural education, it seems very pronounced. It's described as like multiplex relationships sometimes, and I feel like sometimes that can be a real strength, but it can also create some unique challenges that Mike alluded to a little bit. I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit on some of the strengths and maybe challenges that come from that kind of uniqueness of wearing so many hats simultaneously. Let's go Melissa and then Mike.
Well, before I answer the question, Jason, I want to say I appreciate that you're having a focus today on rural, because there are a lot of people at the table making decisions around policy and otherwise that don't understand rurality. And so to be able to introduce some different ways of thinking around how rural places and people to live and work, I think is really important. As multiplex is a unique concept. I love the way that Caitlin Halley describes it. It's like you're the third grade teacher at the school, and you're married to the baseball coach, who also is the fire chief, and you go to the grocery store and you see your mother-in-law, who happens to run the Sunday school program, and. So there's this rich layering and interaction connectedness around how people in smaller communities really are intertwined. Some of the strengths and challenges around those multiplex. The first is those deep connections that Mike was talking about, how you have those close-knit relationships and very strong support networks as a result of that. But there is that lack of privacy. Everybody knows your business. And so that potentially for somebody that's coming into a rural community can be stressful. And especially if you're not prepared for it, might be something that is a negative. The other thing I think is a strength is the community support that lends, where if there's something going on that's a crisis that people need to have some help or support around, people are right there. They are ready and prepared to lend assistance. And the challenge for that would be, where are those professional boundaries? If I'm operating as the superintendent of a district, sometimes those close connections can serve as a barrier, because those boundaries can get blurred. And so that potentially could be a challenge. A strength is there's a lot of opportunities to build trust because you have a lot of engagement. You have a lot of interactions with people on a regular basis, both inside and outside of the school. And so that trusting relationship building is something that can occur all of the time. And the other thing that is important too is conflict resolution. When there are things that are happening that people might not like at the school or might not like within the community, usually those relationships mean that it's easier to resolve the conflict. Of course, if it's not resolved, there is a potential for it to spill over into the professional arena. And so that is potentially a challenge. So Mike, what do you got about multiplex relationships?
Yeah, you know, the thing that really comes to mind for me there, Melissa, is we talk about wearing many hats. It's realizing which one do I need to be wearing at the moment. And someone put in there, I'm a counselor, vice principal, secretary, Jane, all those kinds of things. And recognizing which hat you are wearing in the moment, not letting people change the hat for you. Oh, I thought I was talking to you as superintendent, not as Melissa, who goes to Sunday school with me, right, or goes to whatever and things. And so I think about the informality and fluidity in which which rural folks have to shift roles. And, you know, I think inside of that also is those relationships get deepened on a lot of levels, and I think that most of you would say the same thing here about relationships. You can spend 20 years building those relationships with multi-generations of families, and one decision that you wish you hadn't made can really, you know, it takes 20 years to build trust and 3 seconds to destroy it. So always being mindful, and I don't want to say that we're necessarily walking on a minefield all the time as rural folks, but just knowing the lay of the land and knowing that. So I think it's a lovely asset and a beautiful thing that, you know, I served in a principal where one of the teachers who taught me as a second grader, I was her principal later on. Now it created some stuff, you know, going on, because I also used to mow her grass when I was in middle school and things. But yeah, I think about the complexity of navigating roles and relationships. And I'm a huge Brene Brown fan, and clear is kind. Yes. So being clear and sometimes saying, I'm talking as the third grade teacher, I'm talking as the school psychologist, I'm talking as your pastor here. So I think that just being able to shape shift it's an interesting skill to attain, and one that a lot of rural folks go, oh yeah, I see that. Yeah. Yes. And confidentiality, oh my gosh.
Big time.
Ooh, yep. Yeah,
they don't like it when you say, I can't talk to you about it.
Yeah. Peter shared in the chat Alaska's link to their professional boundaries policy, kind of a cool setup. So thank you for sharing that. I love it. This is great, and it's a really nice setup for when I go. So I've mentioned kind of my experience navigating through all different areas of the country and working with educators everywhere, and I'm always intrigued at because there's I mean, people describe 2 different Americas. There might be 5, 7, or 15 different Americas, you know, when you really start to dig into specific challenges. But there's also these really interesting unifying things that I think we can all learn and really unify around. One of the things I hear in every community, whether it's urban or rural, as it pertains to trying to help create greater resilience for students and for staff, and Jose alluded to it in the chat, is this desire for schools to be able to become kind of like community centers or community hubs. And I think this idea of multiplex relationships sometimes can give rural educators a little bit of an advantage towards really naturally making their schools these community hubs, because so many people are involved in so many different areas of the community as well as the school. And so I think that's a really common piece, that a value that every educator, I think, is interested in at some level. But I think rural educators have some unique experience in that. So I was wondering if you could maybe share some tips or some strategies or things that you've seen that have been successful in helping turn or make some of the schools you've been involved in those community hubs or community centers. Talk a little bit about that. Let's go Mike first and then Melissa.
Yeah, I think about that. That's such a lovely question. First of all, the school belongs to the people. that's 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 an important thing. So it belongs to the school board. No, it doesn't. It belongs to the people who paid the taxes, who built the building and provide the young people. So I think part of that is a mental model of who owns the school. Well, it's the community school. Is my firm belief. And so first of all, there's that mindset about the building itself and that it belongs to the community. And it'll be there long after any of us have, to Melissa's point, being she will be a recovering superintendent in a month. I have been a recovering superintendent. The building stays, and it has its own history and its own memories. And so when I first became a principal at this Letcher Elementary School, a very rural part of Eastern Kentucky, one of the things that we did, there was a local festival, if you will. And so the school was didn't open its doors to any of that. It was, you could use the grounds, but you couldn't use the building. So beginning to open up and recognizing the contribution to local cultural celebrations. I mean, we had one of the biggest square dances in Eastern Kentucky in the gym that, quote, some people did not want anything but tennis shoes on there to get on there for basketball. So we're from Kentucky. Basketball is a big deal around here. So, but I really think turning the school into a place where the community can gather, and not just for athletic events, but for other events as well. Whether that becomes a center for democracy with voting, but really opening the doors and not charging for use of the building. They've already been charged for use of the building. And sometimes you got to work with the school board to build a budget that allows for custodial support after school or supervision or whatever the case may be. So for me, experience has been really turning into a place where folks can come get healthcare services. If you have an FQHC that's willing, that you can reach out to and say, hey, once a month, we're going to have healthcare screenings at the school. It probably has adequate parking. It may or may not have air conditioning and some of the other things. But I really think that you have to think carefully about the school being part of the community, because it is part of the community. They paid for the bloody thing. So let's use it. And again, I'm a little bit on the soapbox here, is if you close it down at 3 o'clock, well, we continue to heat and cool that thing all evening long on Saturdays. And so then we may set the settings back a little bit. So, I think opening it up, it also begins to break down, and I'll pivot, I promise, Melissa, to you. It also breaks down that barrier between, in rural places. In Kentucky, about 12% of the population has a college degree. An abnormal number of the population that work at the school have a college degree. And sometimes education, because the difference in education can become a barrier about a place. And so opening it up, and where in rural communities, a greater percentage don't typically have a college degree, you break down that barrier as well. So yeah, Melissa, I know you have a lot more to add to that.
Well, I mean, some of the things that you're talking about are things I would have said too. I kind of chuckle when we talk about community schools and how they're the new hot thing, but really rural schools were the original community schools, because that's how we've always operated. We've always been the heart of the community, the place where people gather and civic events happen. And it's not just about the education of children. It's really the whole community that can get involved with what's happening on that campus, as you so eloquently said, Mike. The things beyond the community events that Mike's talking about, whether they're graduations or athletics, or your robotics club is having an open house night to show off what they're doing. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, for shared services to happen there, whether it's, you have your municipality is having an event there, or maybe you have Mike mentioned voting, but even beyond that, adult classes in the evenings, or different kinds of community meetings that need to be held somewhere. And so the school is often the place where that can happen. Reaching out and ensuring that you know who in the community has a need, and how can the school help partner to bring that need to the community at large, so assets can be leveraged to solve whatever those problems are, and the school can serve as that gathering point, or even taking the lead on some of those things that are issues within the community, and saying, how can we, for example, chronic absenteeism, which we'll talk about, but how can we work together as a community to solve that problem for our students? Making sure that there are open lines of communication, I think, is vital to ensuring that that we do truly have a community approach. So what's going on? How are we getting out to the population with that information? Are we doing two-way community communication, and ensuring that we're all aware of the things that are going on both within and without of the school building? Parent involvement is something that is always a more difficult lift in especially our remote rural communities, where we have parents that would have to drive long distances to get to the school, that may or may not have transportation, that may or may not have a work schedule that allows for them to come to the school. And so what are we doing to ensure that not only are we doing outreach to our parents to involve them when things are happening, like parent conferences or end of the year celebrations with our promotions and our graduations or our award ceremonies, but what else are we doing to make sure that we're involving our parents, both in and out of the building? And, you know, volunteer programs are great. You know, having an opportunity for people that are in the community, that are your assets in your community, that have gifts to bring to the education that's being provided to those young people. How can you involve your volunteers and really engage those community members in a meaningful way so that they're able to contribute? Those are just some things I would add.
Great, thanks. Melissa, I'm going to put you on the spot here just a little bit. Do you have so you used a term that I think is really, really interesting, and some may be familiar with it, but some may not. The term you used is asset mapping. Could you do 2 minutes on just a brief overview of what asset mapping is for somebody that may think they understand but may not have a clear picture of it?
Absolutely. And Mike, I want you to feel free to jump in on this one, because this is your wheelhouse. This is what you do. But asset mapping is just making sure that you're identifying what are the things within the community at large that the school can leverage to maximize the opportunities that they're providing for their students, whether it's people that are in the community, your retirees, your workforce, others that are living and working in the community that potentially are those that could offer services and supports. It's your buildings, it's your municipalities, it's your geography, what's around in terms of the lay of the land that you could potentially tap into. And there's a lot of rural leaders that have a lot of assets at their fingertips, but they haven't taken the time really to identify what those things are, and in a meaningful way, convene a gathering of people that can talk about how do we use those assets so that we're able to provide some interesting connections that really enrich what's happening within the school building.
That was awesome. How'd she do, Mike?
Fantastic. I don't have a single thing to add. It's, you know, it's really, I think we talked about this, maybe you mentioned it, Melissa, this scarcity versus abundance mindset.
Yes.
I don't have this, comma, and, you know, I'm not Pollyanna-ish completely. I am pretty Pollyanna-ish, and things, but there are assets that we map. And sometimes as rural folk, we don't want to ask. We're just like, I don't want to put somebody out. Well, it turns out if you don't ask, I didn't know there was a need to begin with. And so if I can just share a brief example, Jason, in working in one community, and one of the churches was like, we're gonna offer after school tutoring on Mondays from 3 to 5, and we're going to use our church vans to deliver. And so this is an example of the faith-based community coming around and being a little bit competitive. This particular denomination, we'll call them Presbyterians, we're not about to be outdone by the Catholics or the Baptists or anybody else. And so what began to happen is like, well, if you're going to do it, we're going to do it too. And so Monday through Thursday, you have this contribution for young people that is there supporting. And it took the question going, oh yeah, we do have those vans out back that only run on Sundays. And we have people in our faith community who do want to serve others, and this is a way that works for them. And so I really think beginning to just put those pieces together, sometimes we think we have to have the full answer, and the reality is that there's not a silver bullet. And this, please don't take this the wrong way, but there may be a shotgun approach that we can get a lot of little things in that pattern, as opposed to one thing. It's lots of little things. So
awesome, thank you, appreciate that. So I want to get to, I know one of the things that's come up, and in the, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to combine a couple of ideas here. Hopefully it doesn't muddy up the question too much. But one of the things I think a lot of people are interested in, it's come up a lot, has been this challenge of chronic absenteeism. I hear it. I hear it in almost every community I go to as a challenge specific to them. It's certainly not unique to rural, but I think the rural version of it has some unique challenges, in part because of the broad geography that accompanies it. And so, makes it a little more difficult to do, certain things like home visits, etc. But I want to combine that, a discussion around themes you're seeing around chronic absenteeism, and I want to connect it to another concept that has come up in some of our previous discussions. We all share, I think, a common value of the power of relationships and how key those are. And one of the things, again, that I'm impressed at educator relationships everywhere, but certainly the multiplex nature of things that's been described makes some of the rural approach to relationships, I think, really fascinating and really impressive to me. So here's the question in all all of that setup. What's some of the connection that you see between relationship building and trying to work towards that challenge of chronic absenteeism, and what are maybe some strategies you've seen used to help improve chronic absenteeism? Is there any overlap with that idea of relationships? And then any other thoughts in general that you have on that? Let's go for this one. Let's go Melissa first, and then Mike.
I'm gonna drop something in the chat real quick. There was a White House summit called Every Day Counts a couple of weeks ago that I was lucky enough to be able to attend. And Hetty Chang out of Attendance Works and Bob Balfans out of the Grad Partnership, he does work out of Johns Hopkins University, provided some tools that I think might be helpful for any school leader or school system to potentially have in their toolkit. What I put in there is it has a digital backpack of resources, and it has an action planning tool that can be used for the school so that you can have those conversations about, this is where we're at, here's the data that we're seeing. Is there something in particular that we can do to address a particular needs of a subgroup, or how are we going to approach this? And then there's the PowerPoint presentation from the actual summit, but hopefully that's helpful resources for you. Is there a connection between relationships and absenteeism? Absolutely. I would say that, and Mike and I have discussed this before, those strong relationships, those connections that teachers are able to make with their students do have a difference in engaging them back into the school building. And if the child feels like they are not engaged with their teacher, if they don't have that positive connection with their teacher, they're less likely when they have an opportunity to not come to say, no, I'm going to go anyway. I think that as a leader in a school system, one of the things that I am responsible for is setting the culture and climate of the building. And so as a leader, I think it's really important to understand that we really have an opportunity to do some of that building of positive culture. And that also starts with relationship building with our staff that then can translate into their classrooms with their students. And so the foundation of everything around chronic absenteeism is that relationship building piece. I would also say that parent involvement is also important to tap into. How are you engaging parents to ensure that they understand the importance of school? Are you able to connect with them? And Sean, I appreciate that sometimes teachers are the ones that fill that gap. Because there's not the opportunity to build that relationship between home and school, but certainly we want to, in every way possible, reach out to those homes to ensure that there is that connection if it's possible. And then I think that it's also a community discussion. When we have children that are not coming to school on a regular basis, that's a community issue. And so how can the community then get involved, whether it's with our faith-based organizations or it's other organizations operating within the community, civic support groups, those kinds of things, to ensure that they're a part of that initiative to bolster attendance as well. It's not just, as Mike was talking about, there's not just one thing that's going to move the needle on chronic absenteeism. It does need to be a layered approach. And so there are things that can be done at the classroom, the site, the district, and then the community level. And it's making sure that, that the school opens the opportunity to have consultative conversations with the community at large around what are they seeing, what can we do about it together to ensure that students are getting to school.
I love it. Thank you, Mike. By the way, before Mike goes, I'm going to put up a link at the end. Melissa's comments reminded me, we've got a parent resource for resilience, a parent guide to resilience that we're going to share. We want everybody to have, for those that are new here, we'll get a link out to everybody, and we want everybody to get access to that. So love that you reminded me that the importance of anything we can do to get parent involvement. Mike, what are your thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, I think that, you know, when we take a look at a lot of our policy, it's punitive in nature. As about wearing multiple hats as superintendent, I was the director of pupil personnel. I was the truancy officer while being superintendent. That's an example of wearing multiple hats. And so when you looked at things like the letter that we had to send to folks, like it was generated legal letter, it was not soft. You will be in court. We will fine you. We will da 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 da. And so there was immediately this punitive, consequential mindset that was held. And I think that it didn't work. The court system did not want to bring parents forward to when they're overburdened. So parents will go really quickly. There's nothing going to happen anyway. I think that if the shift to Melissa's point culturally is about restoration and relationships and the why. I mean, really getting to the root cause analysis of why is this particular child not coming to school, and helping, you know, address that core one at a time. And again, you're going to see some commonalities, yes, but it's almost like the multi-tiered systems of support that we're used to. It's applying it in this situation. We know that relationships matter to kiddos. And I want to circle back to an early part of our conversation where when we have a lot of turnover in staff, those new staff tend to be destabilized. They're trying to figure stuff out. Oh, and go have real powerful relationships with, you know, 89 students or 150 students, depending on, you know, where you may be teaching. And so, so when I think about all the systems and pieces that are wrapped up in this, helping stabilize our teaching force has got to be part of it. helping, because we know what happens when the teacher says, hey, y'all, I've got a doctor's appointment. I'm going to be out on Tuesday. Guess what happens?
You're
The
subbing.
attendant, yeah, the attendance goes down because there's a sub, and if it's not if the teacher's not going to be there, nothing's going to happen. Or I have a relationship with that particular youngin that is so strong that that's why they come to school. And so when I think about all of those things wrapped around, again, I'm not saying teachers don't take a sick day. I'm just saying that we know that the power of the relationship, because of what happens when you have a sick day. And there are those kids who I come because I absolutely love Miss Bustle, and she sees me in a way that nobody else does. And so she's not going to be there. I'm not going to be there either. And so I think it just speaks to the power of the relationship that is there, and just continually asking ourselves, why come to school? Ask the kid. You have to be in conversation with kids, because they'll tell you, I don't come to school late because the person who works the desk when I come in bullies me and says things like, well, I sure am glad you finally made it to school today. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. I would say if that's a conversation between me and Melissa, we're equals, and Jason, I'll throw you in that. We can call it sarcasm, and we can practice that, and have maybe even laugh about it a little bit. But when there's a power dynamic between a student and an authority figure, I call that bullying. That's what I call it. And so, are we having a situation where a kid goes, I'm not coming to school because I don't want to put up with that. I'm just going to miss the rest of the day instead of coming in late. So thinking about all those layers of relationships, and the power of the bus driver. Oh my gosh, the power of a bus driver. I have no idea. I am so glad to see you versus get on back. So, yeah.
Right.
I love it. We have a concept in the language of white triad resilience we teach called surrendering the one up, and it really is trying to create an awareness within ourselves of those power dynamics and what it can do to the sense of value that the person on the other side of that relationship may feel. And it's this approach to intentionality. What are some intentional things I can do to always try to help every kiddo feel value and worth when they're around me? And part of it is an awareness of what that power dynamic can do. It's awesome. Oh, nice. Thanks, Chris. There was, we're running out of time. We're probably going to go about 5 minutes after the hour, if that's okay with you, panelists. This is an important conversation. Do either of you have any thoughts? The question was raised in the chat. Is there an example, or could we elaborate a little bit on how we could use external groups, whether it's a faith-based organization or some other external group, as part of the charge towards trying to solve or reduce chronic absenteeism? What would that look like in practice to involve an external group? For example, like a church or faith-based organization. Do either of you have thoughts on what that looks like in practice?
Literally, this is what we do in our work around collective impact is there's a convener. It can be the school district. It can be the pastor. You don't have to wait and get permission. If you see something, do something. And so when I think about convening a group to say, we want to improve student attendance, and so that's our population level result, if you will, is who has a contribution to that. And inviting those folks to the conversation, and please make sure and always invite kids and teachers and parents to the conversation as well. But it's sending that call, and those folks who you can say, well, how do you make them come, Mike? Well, you don't make them do anything. You send the invitation. And if you phrase it in such a way as, we want all of the young people in Cowan School to thrive and succeed. And we know that attendance is part of that. We invite you to the conversation. Now you can say, we can do the invite and send it to everybody, but then you go, oh, we know we need this person, this person, this person. And these are people in the community who can have sway, if you will. So it's a matter of just calling the conversation and framing it around young people. And don't have it at school, if you've got a library, if you've got a community center, if you've got a church, you can have the next one or the ones down the road at school, if you will, and that's go to that contradiction of, is it the community center? If folks feel comfortable coming to school because that's the culture, then yeah, do it there. But bring them together, and you don't have to solve the problem as the convener. You're asking the group to do it. You're asking the community, the village to do it. And you always ask, who's not here? Who's not here that needs, who has voice that needs to be in this conversation? So you're always widening the circle to solve the problem, because it's the community's challenge, not one person's challenge. So I don't know if that makes a lick of sense or not, but.
Ditto, what he said. That's a great answer, Mike. I think you hit it very, very succinctly.
Awesome. This has been really, really good. This is gonna feel maybe a little bit out of left field, but I always feel an obligation to try to get as many strategies out on the table as we can. And maybe this sets us up for a part 2 that we're just gonna have to do down the road as well, because this has been really, really rich discussion. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, so within our approach to resilience, in the world of why try. And I think this connects back to absenteeism, relationships, etc. One of the concepts we try to stress is the concept of relevance. And I think it's something every educator, whether they have the language for it or not, is a concern for them. How do I make my content relevant to the kiddos that I'm delivering it to? How do I make them interested in school within a system where they're told they have to go to school whether they want to or not? And I think rural educators have been uniquely good at that concept of relevance. You know, how do they may have kiddos coming from families that may or may not value education. They may have kiddos that may not be looking at a college path, maybe looking at trying to prepare themselves for a trade. And so the question I would love, just kind of a quick hitter, if you have any strategies, what are some strategies you've seen, you've done yourself, or you've witnessed that you feel like have been effective in helping to make education relevant as it pertains to delivering that content to our rural kiddos? Because I think that's a great lesson all educators can build on as well. Let's just keep the same order. Let's go Melissa and then Mike.
Okay, so quickly, I would say you have a very good opportunity in a rural place to do place-based education. So how are you pulling in the local community, the culture, the climate, the context around the history of the place, and the people that are there that can lend their stories to what's happening in the classroom? Project-based learning is that also, it goes hand in hand with place-based education, but how are you able to involve students in community projects to address local issues, or create their science project and go beyond just the science project, but they're solving a real world problem? Making sure that there's student voice and choice. Are you asking them what engages them? And then are you structuring your lessons so that it includes not only what they're interested in learning about around a particular standard, but allows them to choose what their output is going to look like? And yes, exactly, Trina, it does absolutely lead to student leadership. I love that you pointed that out. CTE programming in rural communities, I think, is a real great way to engage students in relevant educational opportunities that lend themselves very nicely to workforce development in the community. And so if they have an opportunity to learn while they are in school, something that will pay them when they're out of school, they will stay most of the time if they have an opportunity to earn a living wage. And so what are you doing to build up those CTE programs? And then again, involving the community, guest speakers, presenters, career days, those kinds of things, really to bring the community in, can be very engaging to students, and again, show relevance in what they're learning. It's not just isolated algebra, although I can't really often figure out algebra in my daily life, but if somebody that is doing things with algebra can come in and talk to kids about why is it important for them to learn in the real world. This is what I'm doing with it. Then again, it makes it more relevant and engaging. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Wow. Well, I made three words in here, and for me to be brief is difficult, Jason. And Appalachia, we have a descriptor that boy can fill an onion sack. I've been accused of filling an onion sack. For those of you who don't know what that means, you can look it up. But the three words came top of mind for me, and you touched all three of these, Melissa. One is that there's choice in there. The students have choice in the work. Now, you may have to learn a theorem to support algebra. How you apply it could be the space for choice. There's going to be the fundamental piece you've got to know. The second word for me that really resonates here is authenticity. And again, this goes back to the place-based. If we're going to engage me, then in an authentic way, my place has to be involved, or my interest has to be involved in that as well. And then the third here is that it connects in some way with people, with community, with my dreams, but that there's a connection somewhere in there. And so I think about those three, choice, authenticity, and connection, weaving those in, I think help build engagement, help build trust, help build a culture where I have some authority here, I have some purpose, and I can grow. Not to borrow too much from Dan Pink's Mastery, Autonomy, and Purpose as primary motivators, but those are motivators for young people too.
I love it. So good. I think if you filled an onion sack, hopefully in the most positive way possible. I enjoyed it. I think we are unfortunately up on our time. I've got one last question for you, and while you answer, I'm going to put up contact information as well as information to your organizations in a slide here. So that slide will be looping, and then it will also have a QR code. If you'll fill out like literally a 20-second questionnaire, we'll send you a link to get you access to that parent resource on resilience. Really handy. Here's the question. So we have the luxury of having two individuals here that are at stages of their career where they can look back and kind of observe their own experience. So the question is this: what is something that you know now that you've learned in the process of education that if you could go back in time and talk to the first year educator version of yourself, what's a thing you've learned that you would really tell the younger version of yourself to make sure you try to learn this as early as possible? Let's go Mike, and then we'll go Melissa.
Oh, what a lovely question. I'd say to my that old 8th grade teacher, science teacher years and years ago, take more chances and more risks, because whatever you learn in the spirit of continuous improvement, it's a bruise, not a tattoo. Learn, get up, go on. But yeah, it's a bruise, not a tattoo.
Love that. I think I would tell my 6th grade teacher self, it's not all about the standards and the assessments. It truly is the foundation of everything is relationships. And so that's where you start every time, is building those relationships with students that are so critical for their success, and making sure that that student-centered approach is there, making sure that we're building an opportunity for them to be the best version of themselves by the time they leave our classrooms.
I love it. I'll share my own as well. Before I do that, Mike, I need you to put your 8th grade educator hat on and get prepared to give me a letter grade. I'm gonna try my best. I'm gonna say a word, and I need you to give me a letter grade on how accurately I said the word. Okay. The word is Appalachia.
Hey, it was a bruise, not a tattoo. You learned, you got up, you moved on. There you
Did I get it right?
Hey, you're A, straight up A for Appalachia.
Thank you. I just was imagining, not at you specifically, but throwing an apple at you. So my response to the question, the question I posed to you, I think if I could go back to that first and second year school psych, I think a lot of times as early educators, we have a lot of insecurities built into who we are. I didn't come from a long line of educators. I was the first one in my family to go to college. My granddad had an 8th grade education, and I had a lot of insecurities. I felt like I had sneaked into a club that they were going to kick me out of at some point. And I think because of that, I automatically sought out the most reinforcing perspectives that I could, the ones that would reinforce the ground that I stood on. And it wasn't until later on in my career that I realized at a better level the value of seeking out differing opinions and differing perspectives, and sometimes even perspectives that I might on the surface feel like I would disagree with. And it really allowed me to broaden my perspective towards different approaches, and I think it made me a better educator. But I had to get to that point. So the advice I would give the younger version of myself is seek out as many different perspectives on approaches and experience as you can, because there's a lot of different types of educators that are really good in their own way, and we can learn from them all. So hey, Mike and Melissa, this was really fun. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's give our attendees a bit, or excuse me, our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you so much for bringing such great content. Please, if you have any questions or follow-up questions, reach out to the email addresses that we've put up. Check them out on the socials. Take a look, for reals, check out Melissa's podcast. There's some really intriguing conversations there. And then huge thank you to all our attendees. Thanks for showing up for a June webinar. Thank you so much. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for putting in the work. I hope all of you have a great summer and do something, at least one awesome thing to recharge your batteries and get your cup filled back up in this summer season. And thank you, everybody. We'll probably not have another webinar for a few weeks. I'm going to try to potentially sneak one in July. And otherwise, thank you so much. This has been really fun, really, really fun. And I'm serious. I would love to do a round 2 of this here later on in the year. So we'll keep doing. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for showing up. Yes, this was recorded. Susan, we will send out a link to the recording, and we would love it if you would share it, please. We try to have conversations that can be beneficial to anybody, and so we hope you'll share. And thanks again, everybody. Go have a great afternoon, everybody. Have a great weekend this weekend as well. I'm going to play us out with a little bit of music. Mike, Melissa, you are welcome to stick around and peruse the chat. And otherwise, great to have you all.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all so much. Good to be with you.